Right. Good evening, Clive. How are you doing?
I'm good, Graham, as always. How's yourself?
I'm not bad, thank you very much. It's very sunny outside, which is great, so I can't wait to get
Glorious.
out in the good
Yep,
weather.
absolutely.
Yeah, so here we are. It's Five with Clive, and tonight it's Five with Clive and guest. We've got Mark Rowbotham of Portcullis joining us today, and the subject for the day is, well, we've already done a session on PVA, postponed VAT accounting, but we wanted to focus a bit more on what happens before that, which is the import VAT, and basically how do businesses claim the import VAT, and what rules do they need to follow. So I'm going to pass over to you guys and let you just discuss it.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Graham. Yeah, evening, Mark. How you
Good
doing?
evening, Clive.
Good. Yeah, well, I think it was important. What we wanted to do here was to get across to the membership just how important it is to construct the import transaction declaration correctly. And Mark will agree, and Mark will obviously, with his customs background, will bring his knowledge to bear here. So before we get to the issue of PVA and claiming PVA, which we've spoken to our membership before, is important is how do we construct that commercial transaction and then the import declaration, so our members then do retain the right of import tax deduction. And that's the critical thing, isn't it, Mark?
It certainly is. I mean, one of the things we've discovered since the whole withdrawal of the UK from the EU is the importance of customs procedures. And I think the one thing that companies are suddenly discovering is that this is no longer a question of just getting a trailer shipped from Germany or the Netherlands into the UK. Because customs require there to be a series of declarations, and the export declaration at, let's say, the EU end, and an import declaration into the UK, they also have very distinct rules on valuation. Because when an import declaration gets raised, and this is more so than export declarations, the import declaration is making those goods that are coming in subject to import duty and import VAT. So HMRC require there to be a full commercial invoice at the time of import, showing the value of the goods and always the freight costs, because it's those combined costs that are going to become subject to import duty. I mean, there's insurance as well, but that's fairly nominal. So we've got the scenario now for importers that they have to receive a full commercial invoice in advance of the import declaration. Now, it's one thing receiving an invoice, but at what point is the importer paying for the goods? And we've got two scenarios, Clive, and I think this is one of the crucial elements. Firstly, the importer is going to pay for the goods at the time they come in the country, or even before then, depending upon the credit terms, so that by the time the goods get landed in the UK, the importer owns them. Well, that's fine. The importer has paid for the goods. They are now going to be responsible for raising an import declaration through their clearing agent. So they send a copy of the invoice to the clearing agent, and the agent will therefore raise the declaration on their behalf and submit the declaration to customs, and also send a copy of the declaration to the importer.
I think now that's a key input, isn't it, there, Mark? Isn't it? Just to stop you there. That's the key element here, isn't it? Which is, in previous times we know there was importers of record, and that was a service that logistic companies could provide.
Yes.
And obviously the declarant as well could potentially have the right to deduction as well in times gone by. But what I think it's important to get across to everybody here is that unless you own those goods at the point of importation, then you do not have the right to that deduction.
This is right. HMRC actually state in various places that if, let's say, the goods are consignment stock, so in other words, the exporter actually owns those goods at the time of entry, then that means the exporter would effectively be responsible for the import declaration, depending on whichever Incoterm they use. And that means that effectively the importer of record, let's say it's a warehouse keeper, would not be able to reclaim the import VAT that's levied on that consignment. And the EU's has had these rules in for quite some time, that when it comes to consignment or even call-off stock, okay, there's all sorts of petty little things, but the point is that the importer cannot reclaim import VAT because they don't own the goods. I've got plenty of clients who had this problem, funnily enough, because they serve simply as a service provider for things like blending materials, things like pesticides for a start, or even paints or other things. And they're going to re-export a lot of those products. But the point is they don't own that product when it comes in. And therefore, the issue is they can't claim import VAT at that time of import.
No. And that's the key bit. And I think what our message is tonight to our members is that you need to look closely at the commercial transaction.
Correct.
And also look at, therefore, who then is the importer at the point the goods come into the UK.
Indeed.
And that declaration, so your agent or frontier agent you appoint, then obviously reflects that within, within the declaration. So as Mark says, there's a commercial invoice that includes not only the goods, transport, if that's the case, or insurance, depends on the Incoterms. But I think that the critical aspect here is that, and I don't think it's widely appreciated, because you can go through that import process. You can claim the import VAT, you can claim PVA, and unencumbered, basically. There's no checks or validations being done at that point.
Yeah.
However, it's not about next week or next month or next year. HMRC have 4 years. They could go back 4 years.
Oh,
so
indeed.
I think, this will have focus at some point. It doesn't have now, but at some point HMRC will come back and look at this and say, right, as the importer, did you have the right to deduction?
Well, they can do that anyway, Clive, because let's face it, HMRC have the VAT numbers, the ORI numbers of all importers anyway. They know who's arranging a transaction, and that means it doesn't take much for them to go into the customs computer, look at a particular VAT number of a particular trader, and then do an investigation over, as you said, anything up to 3 to 5 years. And that means they can easily check on the invoices. They can easily check basically on who owns the goods, and therefore find out to what extent the importer has in fact carried out that transaction properly. And if they find, and they already are doing, that importers have been claiming the VAT back without owning the goods at the time, they will then hit them with a bill, because that is a legal issue that says the importer did not have the right to claim the VAT back because they didn't actually own the goods at the time they entered the UK.
Yeah. And I think that's the important point, this evening. I mean, we could speak for hours on this, Mark. Unfortunately, I think we only have 10 minutes, don't we?
Yeah, we've used nearly 8.5 already.
Have we?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but I think the important thing tonight is, like I say, we could speak for hours on this subject. Is look at that transaction, look at that commercial transaction, and make sure you have the right to that import VAT deduction.
Indeed.
Now, whether that's whether you apply PVA or whether you go through the default position of paying it and reclaiming it, paying it gets paid by your deferment account, and then you recover it through your VAT return on C79. Whichever process you utilise, please make sure, or certainly review and check that you have the right to that deduction. As Mark says, HMRC will come looking at some point, whether now, next week, or down the road, they will check and see whether importers have that right to deduction. And I think there is a misunderstanding out there in terms of how the deal needs to be configured to do this.
I will say this though, because with customs warehousing, I mean, okay, the BWA deals with this. This is the BWA's business, but I have to say that HMRC haven't necessarily said that with a customs warehouse you can bring the goods in. They may be duty free anyway, but the point is they're still under customs control. Now, if let's say the buyer buys out of the warehouse, so that at the time of release from the warehouse, the buyer has already purchased their portion of the stock. Now, they can then have a release warrant, a supplementary declaration raised, which shows them as the owner. It uses their VAT number, their EORI number. Now they can claim the VAT back because the goods have been under customs control in the warehouse. Now that is a solution. It doesn't matter whether it's a public warehouse or a private warehouse, but that rule then does make it easier for importers to make sure they have actually complied with the rules on import VAT.
Yeah, it is a good point. It's a good point. Before Graham stops us, it's a good point, because it doesn't matter how those goods get released to UK free circulation, these checks and validations need to happen, before those goods, whether they go by the frontier into UK free circulation or out of a customs warehouse process.
Correct.
The same checks and validations need to occur to make sure you have that right for deduction. And you're absolutely right. You need to be VAT registered. You need to be all registered. Be the owner of the goods.
Exactly.
That gives you the right to claim that import VAT. And I think that's the final thought on that tonight, Graham, is that members do need to check this out. It's because it will be checked by HMRC.
Oh yes, very
going forward.
Yep. Great. Right. Well, thank you very much, Clive. Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
I hope that was informative. Yeah, I hope that was informative for the members and of benefit. It's probably something that we could talk about for hours, and it might be worth us doing a podcast so that you can talk for hours.
Yes.
But
it would be good. Yeah, you won't be able to stop us. You won't be able to stop us. Let me tell you.
Excellent. All right. There is further information on this on the website, and we will be sharing this with members. But just go to www.thebwa.com. And if you have got questions, if you're facing issues with PVA or import VAT or anything, then contact secretary@thebwa.com, and we'll be happy to help.
Absolutely, we will. Absolutely. Okay, guys. Well, good to talk, and good to talk to everybody, and enjoy the evening, and we'll speak soon. Yeah.
Yes. All the best.
All right. You take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.